Hey guys, Marco the dog trainer here. Today we're going to do a very quick review of the Supet dog cone collar. Now some people might call these e-collars, some people might call them Elizabethan cones. Now we're going to really quickly go over like why I like this one as opposed to some of the ones I've used in the past. It's not an overly complicated thing, so we'll probably get through that pretty quickly. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the cone versus a donut or a suture suit. And then at the very end of the video, I'm going to throw this on a couple of my dogs so you can see a kind of a size reference for it. Okay, so the first thing that kind of drew me to this specific brand was that they have 6 different sizes available, where a lot of the other ones I was looking at only had 3 or 4. And dogs can really come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, especially if we're talking about rescues or mutts. So, and that can be tricky because sometimes even if you follow the dimensions that it's recommending, our dog's neck can be too long and they can still get to like a hurt paw or their stitches. So I like that it has 6 different sizes available to really make sure you can find one that's going to protect your dog. Okay, now just for reference, this one is the extra large, and I think there's one size up from there. Now, all of these collars are basically measured on like 2 different dimensions, and on the app or the website or Amazon, it does give you instructions on how to measure, but it's basically neck girth, which is like the size collar your dog wears, and the neck depth, which is kind of how long your dog's neck is. Okay, if you're not sure, I would just call your vet and double check. And then also, like when you first buy it and put it on, like really test it first before you trust it. Because, like I said, I actually bought one that was a little too small where the neck fit, but the depth wasn't long enough, and my dog was still able to get his head, over to his hurt paw. So just double check all that kind of stuff. Now, the first thing that I really like about this is that it's very, very easy to take on and take off. Okay, so this one is just Velcro, where some of the ones I've used in the past aren't quite so easy to take on and take off. So I've used one that had like button snaps, and that one wasn't too bad, but I think it had like 6 different buttons on it, and if my dog was like squirming and stuff like that, it could be a little hard to get all 6 of them attached. Now, that one wasn't too bad. The one that's a complete nightmare is ones that I've gotten from vets in the past where they have like plastic straps that you have to like weave in and you have to fold things. And it's got like loops on the collar that you have to tie fabric through and like tie a knot. Those ones are a complete nightmare. So if you have a dog that's like getting this really gross or can't eat or drink with the cone on, you might have to take this thing off 4 or 5 times a day for small periods of time. And if you've got that one that I was just talking about with like the plastic that you have to fold and like the fabric, it's a nightmare. It's a complete nightmare. So that's the first thing that I really like about it. Now, kind of on the same note, um, dogs get these things pretty gross, especially if they're going to wear them for like 2 weeks. So if you're actually going to be keeping this thing clean, you're probably going to have to take it off to clean it. Now, the Velcro one, like it's basically like you could just take a Clorox wipe and wipe this whole thing down. The ones with the buttons, it's not too bad, but there is quite a bit more like nooks and crannies that you have to work around to kind of get some of that grime, like built up filth out of there. And then again, the ones with like the plastic loops and the straps and stuff like that, it's a nightmare. Like you'd be surprised where all that kind of gross stuff ends up. Now, the next thing that I like about it is that it's clear, which most of them are transparent to some extent, but I think it's helpful for our dogs to be able to see out of these. Now, the last thing that I could say that's noticeably helpful about these is that they have a fabric covering on the edge that a lot of times dogs that are wearing these, it's like a bull in a china shop. They're like crashing into things because they're not used to wearing it. And I've definitely had dogs run up to me and hit me in the shin with like the hard plastic edge. And it actually surprisingly hurts. So this like little fabric edge just kind of helps to dull it down a little bit so it's not quite as painful if that kind of stuff happens. And it probably also would help with like scratching walls and stuff kind of like that. So that's really all the stuff that I like about this particular cone. Now, as far as like a cone versus a donut or a suture suit, now again, I'm not a vet, so I would probably double check any of this kind of stuff with your vet before you finalize anything. But in my experience with my 4 dogs and some of the client dogs in the past that have worn some of this stuff, I feel that the cone kind of covers, like, you can find a cone that works for every dog, because there's so many different sizes and shapes. Now, when it comes to like a donut, those work for some dogs, but in my experience, dogs that have like a really long neck or paw injuries, a lot of dogs can still get their paw up to their mouth. So the donut, it kind of depends on what your dog's shape is like. And where their injury is. Because like if it were maybe like a neuter or a spay, that might be a little harder for them to get to. But if it's a paw injury, the donut is probably going to be a little bit limited. And in my experience, the donuts tend to work better for smaller dogs. Like a lot of bigger dogs I've seen, they're still getting to the wound that we're trying to avoid. And then I don't have a lot of experience with the suture suits. But I would imagine, one, it might be kind of difficult to find an appropriate size one for every dog, and then two, I feel like a dog after a surgery or that has an injury might not necessarily be super compliant if they're sore and hurting, and you're trying to put like paws through the arm sleeves and the leg sleeves. So that might just make it a little bit difficult for some dogs. And like I said, I don't have enough experience to say for sure, but like my dogs are pretty incessant about getting to their injury. So I still feel like even though they can't get to the wound itself, I feel like they'd still be scratching at the fabric like that's above it. And I'd still worry about that irritating, the wound that we're trying to recover. So that's all the stuff from my experience that I would think about when I'm buying a cone versus a donut or a suture suit. And again, I'm not a vet, so if you're concerned about any of this stuff, just double check with your vet. Now, we're going to wrap up with just a couple, me throwing this on a couple of my dogs just so you can see. Like I said, this is the extra large, which is a 10.8-inch depth, and I want to say it's a 16 to 19-inch collar. And then we'll probably wrap up the video from there. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.